Rick, tell me take me into the decision-making process. What do you buy and why do you buy it?
We look for content. And it's something that I've been doing since the mid-90s when working with Clear Channel, when they took a risk and decided to try something called NTR, non-traditional radio, which of course now has become a major revenue stream for all radio stations. And we did that by taking a risk with our client at the time was the Rio, and we invested in things that were not traditional, that were outside of the radio buy or the radio investment itself, and we invested in that. So we go to radio stations when we're prepared to what we call, we don't really like to call it a buy, we call it an investment, because there's not a client in the world that is not expecting a return on any media money that they give us. So in my opinion, if you say you're going to buy something, it's going to devaluate most of the time. We take the money that is given to us and we think of ourselves almost as investment bankers. And we're gonna take that money and we're gonna invest it in media, and our clients and us are gonna expect a return from where we're spending the money. So with that in mind, when we go out to look to what we find, we absolutely consider ratings, reach and frequency, gross rating points, definitely a factor, put that over here, but what we look for is how is that station going to incorporate what they do into the brand that we're trying to help bring money to their bottom line. And so having said that, how do they bring us unique, and you use the word proprietary or exclusive ideas that don't work for anyone other than the brand that we're representing. So if you bring me an idea that I could sell to 5 or 6 or 8 of my clients, it's completely dead in our mind, because that idea is generic. And that means that when you're out there broadcasting it and the listeners are listening to it, that means it's something that to them becomes a commodity. I need to know an idea that would be exclusive and proprietary to the brand we're representing, then that can only be applicable to them.
Yeah, it just seems to me like traditionally, there was this kind of distance between the people who sell the spots or the ideas and the people who create the content. But increasingly with digital platforms, the opportunity is to say, well, a digital platform that doesn't have an audience can't be sold. And a digital platform that can't be sold, it doesn't matter if they have an audience or not. So now suddenly you've got people on the sales side, people on the product side, kind of collaborating in a way that wasn't historically true. There aren't as many folded arms across the table anymore, or at least there shouldn't be. Is that your experience? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm not sure that, I think in many companies, struggle with creative and sales coming together. I think that there's a rift, and it continues to be that way. Very few companies have been able to successfully combine salespeople and creative people together to work in combination. One of the things we do at InnoVision is we actually ask, and there's several people in the audience here who know this, we specifically ask to work with the creative people and the salespeople at the same time. So we want the ideas that are generated for our clients. And I'm not talking about just the schedules. I'm talking about the
You want things
content.
that work for the station's
Correct.
brand too, in
Correct.
the case of radio.
Absolutely, absolutely. It has to line up with their brand. But we specifically, and we demand that meetings consist of creative and sales input. So we're working with maybe the program director, and we usually like to get management involved or even ownership at that level, because they get excited about it. When agencies have a tendency to just work with the salespeople and buy their schedules, and then they get their added value and they're done. They move on to the next thing. We agonize over this. We look into each investment and we're like, okay, here's our buy. Now let's talk about how we're going to make this buy work in the program of your station. Can we talk to the creatives? Can we talk to the owners? And let's come up with ideas that we can incorporate into the content of your show that are going to discuss what our product is trying to communicate and offer the benefits to your listeners, because they do want to know. People want advertising. Believe it or not, I hear this all the time, and everyone is so interested in scooting advertising, yet 88% of all TV viewers are still not skipping commercials. And people do listen, but the fact is that they do want the content. It's exactly what everyone here has been saying all day. They want to listen to things that are interesting to them and that mean something to them, and that's what we must incorporate our products, our brands into that somehow. And if you look online, I was doing this in 1994. You can see an article about me in Business Week in 1994. I bought the rights to Melrose Place for Kahlua and brought Kahlua into that space. It's critical to be able to integrate the product and what the product benefits and what the product brand alignment is to the content, and be able to incorporate that and put that together so that it melds, so that the brand of your content becomes the brand of the product, and therefore the end user, the consumer who's going to spend the money, that's going to continue to support what you're broadcasting, wants to buy. Bottom line is we have to sell product.
Here's what's interesting from what you've said. You've skirted the whole issue of commercials, of spots, because you're talking about stuff that's integrated, ideas that are integrated into the content of the brand, is specifically what you said. I think Robert this afternoon would use the term native advertising to describe that. That is what you're talking about. Can you give some illustrations of that?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll create events for clients that are specific to that particular client. Do you want exact brand?
Sure.
I mean, the best one, I love the Kahlua one because you can go online and read about it, and it's really easy to understand, and it's a great story. In the 90s, everyone remembers Melrose Place was a huge ratings on Monday night. Well, that came on always after Monday Night Football. So the bars were packed with guys, right? Now, what happens usually after Monday Night Football, game's over, beers, drink, or whatever, stop, and everyone goes and does something else. The concept here was to get the women into the bars. Now, we knew there were Melrose Place parties going on throughout the country. So we approached Aaron Spelling himself, and we asked to buy the rights for Melrose Place, meaning we would be able to use the content likeness of all the actors and characters within that show and the name of the show. We then send out letters to all the bars, pretty much all the bars in the United States that meant anything, and we knew we were having these parties. And they were cease and desist letters that said, you cannot have a Melrose Place party unless you make Kahlua the title sponsor of it and use Kahlua as the brand presenting this night. Well, what they started doing, the concept was, after Monday Night Football, all the TVs would switch to Melrose Place. The women would come in, and guess what? The guys would buy them drinks. It was a huge success. I mean, bottom line is, you have to take the social aspect into everything you do. Remember, everything still involves people and connections and relationship and trust. Those are the key factors of making any campaign successful in my mind.
What is the best thing about the audio space? And I don't care, let's not talk platforms yet. Let's just about audio in general, about communicating via the audio space in terms of messaging, ideas, et cetera. What's the best thing from the advertiser's perspective?
I think the way it speaks I think you have the opportunity to speak to people one-to-one. I think you have the opportunity to do so much more than just radio or just broadcast songs or have personalities on. I think there's tremendous opportunities in that space that I've asked several stations to look into, where you can actually start developing databases of your listeners. I mean, if you want to sell more media, what would be the best way? Speak to the brand and tell them why that brand has listeners on your station. Well, how are you going to prove that? It's going to take an investment. You need to be able to go out, farm your listeners, and build a database. And we talked about bases, and lists are very interesting to me. Again. Absolutely, lists are very important to advertisers, and they want to know not only are there listeners there, but do we have, now that we have all this amazing technology, another way to reach them? Yes, they're listening. Yes, they're responding. Yes, they're buying off of radio. Trust me, we just had a hugely successful campaign with Massage Envy here in the Los Angeles DMA with radio, and Pandora basically were the two primary mediums. And again, I consider Pandora a terrestrial radio station. I do not consider them a digital radio station. I think that it's unfair to treat them as a digital radio station because, do you want me to get into this?
Go ahead.
Absolutely, okay. Pandora set themselves up, in my opinion, to create over-expectation on consumers. I mean, on buyers, people that buy media on their space.
What does that mean?
Well, okay, they say, okay, we have this, and we have these click-through rates, and we have these click-throughs, and we have these click-throughs. Well, yeah, that's true, but so do radio stations. Yes, it's right on your device, and you can do it, but the fact of the matter is that the message has to be delivered through audio, because most people listen to it, like a radio station. So when we look at Pandora, they have this tremendous opportunity, which they utilize, but not, I don't believe, to their fullest extent, to isolate and identify listeners by gender, by age, and by zip code. So this gives them a tremendous opportunity. But what they're failing to do is be able to identify by lifestyle likes. They don't have that information. Yet 97% of all Pandora users refuse to pay the $3 to get commercial-free listening. So that doesn't bother them. Clearly the commercials are not bothering them. And this is forced audio. You can't, you really have to listen to it if you want to continue listening to the station you've created. So this is tremendous. But if they were able to go out, and this is what I think a radio station has ways to do through database building and through their websites, go out and get more lifestyle listeners. Now when Pandora sells to me, they could say, well, we have this age bracket, we have this zip code, and we have this many users of this product in this zip code that we know indicated to us like this product. Whoa, all of a sudden, now not only am I talking the demographics, I'm talking the psychographics, and it's absolutely a statistical fact that that's what they are. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Is that data really not available, though, by integrating a variety of big data sources that can't be overlaid on data that a Pandora, for example, already has?
Absolutely, but that's all speculative. Because there's overlays and there's general awarenesses of likes and psychographics, but they're not specifically indicated by that single user. Mm-hmm. They have the opportunity to send out to all their listeners, hey, can you give us 1 minute of your time and we'll give you this, whatever the offer is. And even if they only get 10% of their listener base responding or 5% to this survey, they're going to get a tremendous sample size of what people do who listen to Pandora. And that's what advertisers want to know. What do these people do? What do they buy? What do they wear? What do they like? What do they drink? Where do they go? What are their habits? That's what we need to know so that we could start identifying, because there's just too many choices. There's too many choices.
So how do you choose between, I want to spend this money, this dollar on radio, I want to spend it on Pandora? I acknowledge what you're saying, that you're considering them both the equivalent of radio stations, but how do you choose between?
We treat it almost exactly the same. We allocate a budget for radio, and then we decide how many radio stations we can afford to hit effectively within that radio budget, in that part of the mix of the entire media. And then we treat Pandora as one of those parts. So if there's a $100,000 budget for radio and we want to buy 3 radio stations, we'll buy Radio X, Radio B, and Pandora.
So it's as if they're on the same ranker from your perspective.
Exactly.
Okay. What about other types of audio? Do you invest anything in podcasting, for example?
We don't, and yet I'm curious as to why. I haven't been approached by anybody. There's not a lot of people approaching on podcasts. I think the interesting thing about podcasts is it can be created. One person can create a podcast, and it's almost like back in the day when everyone could create a radio station, and then the super ones succeeded, and the other ones just kind of went away. It's a very similar model that's occurring. The problem here is that every one of them is individual, and so say, for example, this entire audience, they each had 50 listeners, okay? I don't really want to talk to you to make a deal with you to advertise your 50, and then you to advertise your 50, and then you to advertise your 50. But collectively, if there's 100 people in the room, now you have 5,000 people that I could talk to. Okay, give me one person that I could buy to that reaches all of you in one buy, in one investment, okay? Just like TV or radio, I think it was a concept, right? It works. I'll make one buy, and I'll be just like kind of Pandora is. I get on all the stations with one buy. Someone needs to figure out a way, and I'm not sure if they have yet, they may have, to get great podcast companies to enlist with them and figure out a way to feed the message to all of them, so someone could come to an ad agency and say, I have 10,000 podcasts. These are the vertical interest of the podcast, okay? If you're a horizontal product, you buy all of them. Okay, so I pay you X amount of money, and now you make sure my message goes on every podcast of the 10,000 that you have, or maybe I select 50. What does that sound like? Cable? That's exactly what it is.
Network radio, too.
Exactly, and radio as well.
Yeah, well, Rob Greenlee from Podcast One is ready to spend lunch with you today.
Yes, I am aware of you, and you're doing it right. You're the one, you're absolutely the person that I look at your site all the time. I'm like, this guy gets it. Absolutely, you totally get it. Yeah.
Let's talk about how, sorry?
Yes, absolutely.
Making connections.
That's right.
It's a big love fest. How is traditional radio missing out in your view? What are they not doing that they need to do going forward?
Oh, okay. That's a really long answer, I think. But I think what they're a great medium. and it works. That's the first thing everyone understands. But we need to figure out, I'll speak as if I'm one of them, because I don't like to isolate myself, but we need to figure out a way to make sure we don't become irrelevant, to make sure we don't become something of a dinosaur. And I don't believe that that's even close to happening, because people are still going to radio for so many reasons. But I think what they could do is advertise, to help support their revenue, which they need to do, is I think they need to engage more with advertisers and be able to figure out a way to do exactly what I was talking about, being able to address each brand, each person, each way, in a way that's going to be very different than every other radio station. And for those of you that are listening, that would be my advice. Figure out a way to make sure that you're just not counting on your spots to sell the products, because that's a great support mechanism, and the reach and frequency is critical. And I was talking to Bob Hughes today, you have to hear it 3 times and you start getting the message. That's awesome. But you know what? What if you hear this brand being discussed in your favorite show, or there's somewhere you go that incorporates this brand? What we look to at radio stations now is, if we're going to make an investment in your media, which we're happy to do, what more can you provide us that will help us in the terrestrial world? Give us some exclusive events. Create something for us. Create something in a show, or create something that can help integrate what we're trying to do into part of what you do, but make it interesting.
It's funny, because what you're describing from the advertiser perspective is exactly what my opening presentation was about from the consumer perspective.
Exactly right. And
big, unique, meaningful, star-filled things everywhere, right?
I love your opening, and what you were saying was so, it was so engaging and so true that I just, I was completely, it was so compelling. It was awesome.
Thank you. What advice would you give to someone who wanted you to spend money on their audio medium? They're pitching you. What's the best way to pitch you?
I think definitely know what you're selling. So, for example, know who you're selling to. We have so many salespeople who come in and pitch a client, and they know nothing of that client, and they come in and they know we only buy ideas. So they're kind of prepped on that. They've heard it through the thing. Don't come over to InnoVision unless you have something really interesting to bring. But I'll give you an example. We have a casino client, Valley View Casino and Hotel here in San Diego, and we have people come in still to this day who bring us an idea like, here's what we're going to do with your spa services. And I'll say, did you even look at the internet? Did you do anything? They don't have a spa. And so that's very discouraging to me. Understand what it is we need to do. Every brand should know, I don't know that they do know, what their position is, okay, and what they're selling, and what their goal is. So many different products want to reach different people. They want to talk to different people, and they want to say different things to different people. Once you can understand that, then it's your job and your creative department to work together to bring an idea along with a schedule. Schedules aren't going to do it anymore. You walk in with a schedule, okay, that's great. If we generally won't buy that. Walk in with an idea that's proprietary, inventive, creative, that's going to work, and here it is. And if you buy this, we'll do all of this. Now you have my attention. Now you have my attention.
Great. Do we have any questions from the crowd?
So in your last statement, and you had mentioned it a couple times, you're putting the onus on the station to come to you with proprietary, inventive ideas that incorporate the brands you represent ideally and uniquely. Do you ever go to do the other thing, where you go to radio stations and say, we've got a casino, and we want to do this on your radio station, and it involves something large in scope that it talks to everything you're mentioning about brand integration, and how would they receive that?
Some receive it very well. I will say, having been in this business for so long, I have some friends that started out as salespeople that are now heads of radio stations, general managers of stations. So they get it, because they kind of grew up in that area. They're not all as receptive, and that's usually generally due to one of the things that we talked about here a little bit earlier, because you brought up, is fear. And fear, in my opinion, is the one word, and I discussed this in a presentation I make, is the one word that prevents 99% of the population from being successful. If it's the fear you have to eliminate in anything you do in your life that will help you be successful. If you can be fearless and walk in and try something that's new and try something that's different, and we discuss failure, and you're going to learn from that, but if you really feel something is strong, take a chance, do it. And I walk in the radio stations all the time, and we do that. And there's people who can attest to that. We will walk in with ideas, and they'll say, absolutely. And then there are other radio stations that just say, no, we can't do that. And I think it's fear. I think they're afraid that maybe the brand that we represent's competitors may find that not fair to them. But I always say, well, why didn't they think of it? That's my answer. We thought of this. We're asking you to do it. We're offering to pay you to do it. You're saying no. I got to believe it's out of fear. That's all I can say.
Another question here?
Full disclosure, I'm Bob Hughes, co-owner of KPRI. Rick is one of my most valued clients. What I want to ask you, I like your positioning, the anti-agency, and one of the things that's very different about you is that you place the bulk of your media buy in advance of the year at the beginning, which means you don't see the ratings, which means you're not buying off rankers, which means you're not trying to buy the least amount of spots for the lowest amount of money. And one of the things that happens in addition to what else you do for your clients is you're on a radio station consistently. Your agency competitors frequently will be on a station, as long as the ratings are good. If they drop below top 5, they drop off the station. What does an advertiser lose through lack of consistency across a period like a year on a single station, in your view?
Thank you, Bob. It's a great question. You're right. We don't buy that. We don't buy that way. Sometimes I liken the difference between baseball teams, the people that play by Moneyball and the people that play by their gut. We play by our gut, and we've been right most of the time. We look at stations and we listen to them, and we build relationships with them, and we build trust with them. And invariably ratings are going to go like this. And if you're going to play the money game, no one's ever going to trust you. The consumer's never going to trust you because you're jumping all over the place, and the people you're building relationships with that need to help you. We consider the media people we need, not the other way around. See, the media addresses us like they need us. I have a reverse psychology, again, being the anti-agency. We need them. Without them, we can't succeed. So we need to be able to build relationships and trust, and through that, becomes a great friendship. And through a great friendship, you'll find that many more things are done out of the ordinary, and many extraordinary things are done because of the friendship and because of the relationship. And that's what I've truly found in my life, is not making it about the dollar, but making it about the heart. And I believe that works.